Welcome to another episode of Evergreen Spotlight. I'm your host, Julie Holiday. Today, we feature Jay Reason, an expert project manager and musician. He co-hosts Diablo's Den with Danny Diablo, where the two talk all things underground music. Join me on this episode of Evergreen Spotlight. Jay, we are thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I am so excited to be here with you guys. Thank you for asking me to be on.
Absolutely. Diablo's Den is a podcast that covers underground music and the subculture genre. And I'm wondering if you could please give us a little bit more of an insight into what that means for our listeners who maybe are not familiar.
Definitely. Yeah. When you read the description, it's definitely a very wide net. But so at least for our listeners and from where we come from, the underground subculture is definitely more focused on like the music scene. So hardcore, punk rock, and then the other aspects of like graffiti writing, zines, skateboarding, that whole kind of thing. But a lot of it mostly revolves around the music scene that our host, Danny Diablo, comes out of. He's a legend, an icon in that world. And that was sort of the basis of when we wanted to start doing this was like, okay, where are we going to concentrate? And it was like, grab our friends from here and kind of, use our little world and show it to everybody else.
And what really inspired you and Danny to come together for the podcast?
This is actually a really interesting story because I, in the beginning, was not really that familiar with podcasting or even really had like any aspiration to do a show or anything like that, even though I could talk forever. But so the original plan was Danny had, tried to get Diablo's Den off the ground for a long time. Through various, people and engineers and kind of everything. And, nothing really stuck. So, I would say when it comes to like what I do in my outside world of the podcast, right, I'm definitely a person who, if you need to get something done or finished, or completed, like you would come to me and I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is the plan. It's going to launch on this day, and that was kind of like our biggest thing. So when Isaac came to me with the idea, I said, okay, I'm totally down, but we have to do it like this, and kind of just laid out the parameters, especially like in the beginning. It was like, okay, we're going to try to be super consistent episodes, this time and this time it's going to be formatted as such, and just kind of, again, using like all of the things I have listened to and learned and watched, and kind of just combine that into like a soup and sort of said, okay, I think this will work best for us. And then a lot of it was just kind of wrangling Danny, Lord Isaac into a schedule and a routine, right? So his world is very, usually a kind of unstructured, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to do this and And a lot of it was trying to get him focused on like, okay, we're going to do this episode. It's X amount of time. I need you to prep this kind of stuff. But that was really like the motivation was he was trying to get it done. And I think he just needed somebody like myself who was like, okay, we have to do it like this if we're going to get it off the ground.
Yeah. And every project needs a project manager like you, I swear.
Well, especially too, like, I think when you are like, it's everybody has ideas, right? So it's always like, oh yeah, let's do this or do that. But it's kind of like learning the steps to execute it, getting it off the ground, making it good, making it enjoyable, making sure the quality is good. Again, too, it's like there's so much content out there, right? And you're asking a lot of a person to donate, whether it's a half hour of their time or an hour of their time. Once a week, once a month, whatever it is. But you just want to make sure you're really like understanding what you're trying to do. And then again, can you execute it? Can you execute it, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, as you're trying to do it? And those were the biggest factors for me, for sure.
What is your major goal behind the podcast? Like, what do you hope that listeners take away from the show?
I would say there's two different things, right? So like for me personally, I selfishly will say that for podcasting, it's a lot about just understanding the world of how it works and watching it grow. Again, this was something that was always super interesting to me. So when Danny had the idea to do it, I kind of jumped in because I hadn't done it before, had a lot of clients who asked me about it. So it was really just like a great way to kind of get my feet wet in it. I would say like outside of my own personal goals for the show, it's really just like putting Isaac out there more as like a relatable person, right? It's like everybody kind of knows this lore of him and these crazy stories that exist of him, right? And this is just kind of either furthering that of what you think, or it's giving another side of him, which I think we do a really good job of showing that in certain episodes. He can go from being super angry to being really funny to being really emotional, which again, I think that shows through so much in our episodes. And that was a really big goal of mine. He's one of my really good friends. I've been a supporter of his for years. So again, just something to kind of give him that platform I was in right away.
Yeah. And what do you hope people take away from today?
Just the same thing. I think that my original goal for today was if somebody had the idea and maybe, they were interested in how to get into this, or they see somebody like Isaac or myself and they're kind of just curious. I was really hoping that this episode is going to pull back a lot of that curtain, especially too when somebody like us isn't as consistent as maybe some of the other shows on Evergreen, and kind of how we maintain our little momentum in between episodes, because sometimes they do go a really long time.
And you've had an extensive background in music. Really, you touched on that a little bit. Have you had different milestones along the way that really stick with you?
Yeah, I've been really blessed to have worked on some really big projects. Everything from stuff like Hatebreed early on to, just as recently as Shaka Khan did the, single album cover for her art, to UB40, to Brian McKnight. So I work on a bunch of different stuff. But again, this is, I would say it's this kind of stuff is what interests me the most, especially when it was emerging, coming out, understanding how it goes. It was just something I was really excited. So my background with music and stuff kind of played hand in hand with this, and, just kind of all went moving forward. And it wasn't really a great answer, but trying to put it all together. I'm sorry.
I think that was actually amazing milestones that you're kind of oh yeah, this happens, and with this amazing, huge person. So it's amazing.
You know what it is, Julie? It's I just try to focus on what I'm doing right now, right? Because again, no one cares about what I did 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 10 months ago, right? In my field, it's kind of what are you working on right now? Who are you working with? What are you doing? And again, stuff whether it's working with Isaac or doing a podcast with you guys or doing album covers for somebody, it's all to me, in the same kind of world. There's so many creative people in our field, as you know, from doing this, that it's just great. And meeting a lot of people, picking brains, it's my favorite stuff.
How do you tie that into prepping for the show?
I would say prepping for the show is twofold for me, right? So it's there's prepping the show, which is who are we going to get? And then understanding, do they have something coming out? Are we trying to focus on a specific topic, a show or something? And then the other part is focusing on Isaac. Because again, I always say our show is kind of two-tiered, right? There's the beginning part, which is just him and I talking. And if you look at the stats, that's usually the biggest chunk, right? People are super interested in what he has to say. He's he's very hilarious. So it's, there's just these things. His voice alone just makes people crack up, right? So just looking at the stats, when I see things like that, I always make sure I block out a little extra time, because I know that okay, the first 10, 15 minutes, everybody wants to hear about what's going on. So that's kind of our formula there. And then again, it's just prepping him to be hey, this is the person we have on. They want to talk to you about this. They might ask you about that. So again, I treat it very much if I'm doing an album for somebody or, recording a video for somebody, it's just here's the parts, dude. And then here's the show, I always kind of compare our podcast more to a band than actually a podcast, because it's every time we get one done, I'm oh my God, this is awesome. Because again, if the people who know us and know the elements kind of surrounding me corralling everybody together, it's really amazing that we've been going this long and have had so many shows.
Yeah. And is that the major challenge that you have? And do you have any more? And if so, how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I would say specifically for us, our major challenge is that Danny, Isaac, loves to do stuff in person. So obviously for those who have followed, about 3 years ago, right around the beginning of the pandemic, he moved to Milwaukee. I'm in New York. So that put a huge dent. We used to go to a studio and actually record everything in person. And it was a very different thing. So I would say that that's a huge challenge for us now, is just trying to get him motivated to keep it going. But the flip of that is that inside of our, say, Diablo's Den's our main podcast, we've launched 2 little supplemental podcasts. So one that he does in Milwaukee with his label guy called The Ruckus Show. So shout out to Donnie and those guys for keeping it going. And then I do one called Diablo's Digest, which is just kind of me with some friends. And again, we've kind of used that as our filling in till I see him, right? So then when I do see him, we film it in person. We do the audio like that. It's just a way more fun vibe, which I totally get. He's he's way better in person than he's great online too, but I'm saying that vibe of personality really shines through when him and I are together. So
yeah, there's like something that's like bouncing off of you guys.
Yeah, and we've just been friends for so long, and I think that there are certain things that I can kind of like ask him about that maybe like the normal person couldn't ask. So it makes, again, for just this really great banter. And then when we're in person, I can kind of read his face or the body language a little better. So I know when I can maybe push a little bit more to get something out of him or whatever, which is a lot of fun.
Is there anything else as far as segments go that you have found as a winner and that you want to do every time?
Yeah, like we've done a bunch of different stuff. Like I said, I'm a big analytics guy, like I was just mentioning. So I look a lot at the stats and kind of try to see like where things drop off, or like certain guests, certain genre guests do better for us. Again, we try to kind of expose everything to everybody. So we might have somebody who you've never heard of and then follow that up with somebody like a Vinny Stigma, who's like a, icon in that world. Because again, I think for us, it's always important to show people that there are just so many stories out there, right? Like you don't have to be this legend to have this crazy story to share with us, right? So outside of just kind of understanding the stats that like in the beginning part, Danny and I, talking is kind of the biggest thing. We had like other little segments. One thing called Whack Attack, which I don't condone doing this, but Isaac would find a comment on his Instagram of somebody who said something kind of bad to him, and he would put that on blast. We'd obviously, cross out the names to not dox anybody, but things like that. Obviously, people love stuff like that. For a little while, we were cutting clips and just kind of censoring the swears. People love stuff like that. It's like little simple things. But I would say just again, like for us, mostly like people love Isaac. Like he could talk about anything and people are just like, this is amazing, So those first like kind of 15, 20 minutes are like the most important to us in our episodes.
Thank you for sharing that. I know our listeners will get a lot from that. Good tips right there.
Yeah, I can't stress enough just looking at your stats and understanding your audience, like that's such a big thing too, especially like knowing it goes outside of just music podcasts, right? It's like it's knowing who your audience and where you're trying to be. So it's like, if you see a show that's done weekly and that's what you're trying to be like, well, like you have to get weekly too, right? So one of my biggest goals the past few years has been to try to get us on a schedule. It's very difficult because of Isaac and the control and kind of the way he wants to present this. But again, I think that the most important thing I could stress to anyone just from our podcast and watching other successful podcasts is just that consistency is so key. People have to know that like, if you look at something like Axe to Grind, which is a show on Evergreen, right? It's one of my favorites. Yeah. Shout out to Tom and those guys. But like every Tuesday, it's on. You don't have to worry. It's like, you just know it's consistent, right? Versus us, it's like you might get one a month, might be 5 weeks, and I think that actually hurts us a lot. So one of the big key takeaways anytime I'm teaching somebody about podcasting is just like, look at the shows you like. How much are they putting out content? And just again, if you're trying to be in that space, those listeners are probably looking for stuff that much. You're going to want to do the same thing.
Excellent advice. Love that. Jay, as a producer of a show, can you maybe walk us through the process of wrangling a team from the host to the guest? Like how do we do that the best?
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm going to speak from my end. So if you have a host who kind of is a touring musician, international hardcore superstar, as Isaac calls himself. So, again, it's for us, it's definitely the process. So, when I'm starting a show, whether it's with Isaac or not, that's sort of my first thing. So I would definitely, start with, is Danny going to be available or not, right? If he's available, then the kind of start the command of like, are we doing a guest? Who's that guest going to be? And then what are we covering? And then from there, once I kind of arrange everybody's schedule, like, okay, it's Monday night at whatever, here's the link. And then very much like our technical guys here, kind of get everybody on board and make sure everything's running. Once we get those episodes done, those to me are always like the like kind of easy ones, right? For me, the hardest part is filling in these gaps, right, in between our episodes. So again, we might go 2-3 months without an episode because, Isaac might be touring, he's in the studio, some other things. So one of the things that we came up with, which I had mentioned before, was kind of coming up with these sort of like supplemental episodes. So, something that maybe isn't as reliant as on a guest or isn't as reliant as having a Danny available to me, right? So it might be me grabbing a friend from a local band or even sometimes reaching outside of like our normal kind of circle, so if say we always are doing music stuff, it's like, okay, I might go with like a recording guy or I might go with a zine publisher or an artist. And I found like doing that has helped keep the momentum, because again, like consistency is so important when you're doing these shows. Staying on a schedule, especially to like not getting discouraged if the first few weeks or months or however much content you're doing isn't really getting the traction, right? Because what you want to make sure is that like when somebody like me discovers your show, that I can now go back and have weeks, months worth of content, right? So it's kind of really important, especially again for us to just always have stuff out there, because you never know. Like one of our biggest episodes has a rapper, Necro, very popular underground hip hop guy, right? So that episode is coming up for people consistently. If we didn't have any content past that or before that, it'd be really hard for somebody to kind of stay with us and stick with it, right? But so for that new fan, now there's going to be, 5 years worth of stuff, and now he'll have time to catch up, and there'll be all these little supplemental things. So again, try not to get too discouraged if in the beginning it's like, oh my God, I'm only getting 20 downloads, 30 downloads. Because again, at least you have 30 people or 40 people who you can kind of begin to train and get consistent with you, right? And then it's like, once you get that one guest or that one show and kind of kicks you into that stratosphere, it's really good to have all that stuff with you, so people can kind of go on that journey with your show and discover the whole kind of beginning and end, the beginning and the middle of stuff.
Jay, that advice is so valuable. And I know that not only our team, but the Evergreen audience is incredibly thankful for that. So thank you for walking us through that.
It's so true. I mean, like, again, I said this earlier, but think about the things that you like, whether it's a YouTube channel you like or a podcast, and see how they do it. And again, what are the things you like? You like that they're consistent. You love the production value. You love that when you're listening to somebody talk, the microphones are clear, right? Like there's all these little things that kind of you don't really think about. Try to put those things in the forefront. So again, like when I'm doing, to kind of go back to the beginning of the question, when I'm talking to Isaac, I'm making sure like, hey, microphone volume's not high. This isn't high. Because again, I want the person at the end to get the best product I can give them, whether it's with my limited resources or whether we're in a studio or we're filming with a GoPro, wherever we're doing. But I think those things are just so important. It's just like, don't lose focus. Don't get discouraged. Again, it's like, your favorite show didn't just pick up and become the biggest show overnight, right? It's like everybody had this little journey and then it hits and you're just like, whoa, there's 5 years worth of stuff to look at,
Jay, you've given us hope. You've given us a to-do list. You've given us quality control. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so excited. Thank you guys for having me on again. I'm super available. So if anybody wants to ever talk about podcasting or anything, definitely reach out to me. I'm on Instagram, just JayReason, JayReason. And then, I have my own website called Brand Name Dude. That's for my project management and product management stuff. So yeah, like reach out. I'm always down to help. Like I said, there's so many people who help me. So I'm always down to give advice and help out where I can.
I love it. Well, I know that a lot of our Evergreen audience, like they love the rapid fire questions. So I wonder if we could just get a few of those in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because there's a couple that I really want to know, like specifically from you, what your favorite is. So your favorite underground band of all time.
It's got to be Hatebreed for me. Obviously, like I'm a Connecticut guy. I was blessed to work with Jamie Josta, the singer, for years, ran his label with him. Those guys just mean so much to me, the band and everything. So that's a really easy one for me.
First concert ever attended?
Janet Jackson, 7th grade. My parents never let us go to concerts. And somehow in 7th grade, I think because there were so many people going, I convinced my mom. I wasn't really like a big Janet Jackson fan. Not that I'm not a fan, but that was my first concert. I will always remember that.
Favorite karaoke go-to song?
Oh, that's easy. Mr. Big, To Be With You. I will sing that all day. And it's one of my favorites. If not, Elvis, Suspicious Minds. So those are my two go-to.
I love Suspicious Minds. It's one of my favorites.
If we're out and I've had a couple shots, we're doing both back to back. So I'm signing up for double songs.
Yes, that's amazing. I love it. Are you more of a vinyl, CD, or digital music consumer?
So I got to say vinyl because I own a record store in Connecticut called Static Era Records. So definitely vinyl. We sell everything, but yeah, no, I'm a vinyl nerd for sure.
Amazing. Dream guest for Diablo's Den?
I can honestly say that I don't know if I really have a dream guest because we have had so many cool experiences. I kind of too, I think I'm just so lucky that I'm friends with a lot of people that maybe would be guests on other shows. I don't have a great answer for you for that one right now. Maybe okay. I'd probably just say Elvis if he was alive because he's my favorite, kind of like a musician character. So probably him if he was alive.
Excellent.
My favorite.
Excellent. And most underrated album, in your opinion?
Oh, God, that's a really tough one. Can we say, let's go with Vanilla Ice, Mind Blowin', which was his like later rap record where he had the dreads. It's a very interesting record. You should look it up. It's, I was a big Vanilla Ice fan growing up as a kid. So,
and now we have an album to go look up. We have a whole list of things to do.
That one's a rabbit hole. Like I said, it's about the same time where MC Hammer put out a very interesting, really interesting time in music. So definitely look that one up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Jay, thank you so much for your time and for telling us all about your show and then also giving us advice and an insight on really how to best manage a team, which is something that you are impeccable at, I must say.
Awesome, Julia. Thank you so much for having me on and the whole team there for coordinating this. Like I said earlier, if anybody needs anything, get at me. I'm super excited. And again, I'm really excited to be part of the Evergreen team here. I have said that to all of you guys offline, but I want to put it on record here that we are psyched to have our show with you guys.
Thank you, Jay. And for podcasts like this, along with many other genres of podcasts, check out evergreenpodcast.com. That's evergreenpodcast.com. And I'm your host, Julie Holiday, and thank you for joining us under the Evergreen Spotlight.